When we uploaded the video about the Golden Gate and we got to know more about the Great Depression, a few people told me to make a video about the Great Depression. It's the 1920s and the world's economy is not that bad, but Germany is having a terrible time because they have just lost World War I and they are forced to pay for all the damages, and that's to every country that was involved. And this is a time where the German marks is basically worthless, and if you want to get $1, you have to give a truckload. At this time, a lot of countries are at a bad position. Germany is completely ruined. The Ottoman Empire has collapsed. The entire continent of Europe needs to rebuild, and they're waiting for the paycheck from Germany. And this is in a place where Germany has no money. But in the middle of all this, there is a country that not only did they not lose any money in this war, but they profited off of it. And the economy is booming, and that's the US. Everything is going well for the US until we get to the 24th of October 1929. This day is called Black Thursday. On this day, the New York Stock Exchange basically collapses, nearing zero. And this is the moment the Great Depression began. In the US, just like Europe, their economy crashes and a lot of problems begin for the people. A lot of Americans were upset because this depression was ruining their life, and unlike the Europeans, they were not allowed to drink alcohol. It's good to know that in this moment, it's prohibition in America, and you couldn't buy alcohol. The only people that were not doing too bad were the people that didn't have any stock, or if they had it, they sold it before the crash. The other group of people that were doing well were the mafias, especially the mafia groups in New York and Chicago, the ones that would sell alcohol under the table. And the most famous one is Al Capone, which we've made a video on. At this time, most people in the US were going bankrupt and were doing terribly, but the mafia was getting richer day by day. There were a lot of problems, there were a lot of alcoholics, and the mafia was swimming in cash. They get so rich that businessmen in New York and Chicago start to take loans from these guys. After this took place, most of the cash flow that was coming into the mafia's business was from interest rates from the loans they have given out. We could say in the Great Depression, the mafias got way too powerful, but everybody was hungry and unemployed. What the people did back then was that wake up in the morning, go into the unemployment line, and go home at night hungry. In our video about Golden Gate, we mentioned it. It was the same thing all over the country. Like when they were building a skyscraper in New York, there would be a line downstairs just in case anyone fell, they would have a job now. But this situation is not only in the US, and the whole world is suffering. Majority of the people are hungry, unemployed, and they have no hope for the next day. But why did the New York Stock Exchange collapse? Because we mentioned before, in the 1920s, it was only the US that was having a good time. At that time, there were a lot of money in the country, a lot of jobs, everybody had jobs, and everybody had money. And where did they put their money? Into the stock exchange. All the graphs were moving up day by day. The banks gave out loans like it grew on trees. A lot of people would take loans just to buy stocks. The loans had insane interest rates as well. By doing this, the banks gave out too many loans to regular people, and they would use the money to pay the loans they had gotten earlier, and loan on top of loan, they owed money. This situation pulled the money out of the banks and put it into the stock market. A lot of rich people realize that the banks are gonna collapse after this, and the stock market is filling up like a bubble and it's about to burst. And that is why they sold all their shares. After everything was sold, something like Black Thursday happened. When you look at this situation closely, the rich got way richer and the poor lost everything. because they didn't know that they have to sell the stocks before it crashes completely. Either way, everybody's investment went to zero. So it's the same thing for the US. You wake up to get a piece of bread and go home hungry. With all that, the US situation was better than the entire world. Why? Because the US didn't owe money to anyone like Europe did. And that's because Europe loaned billions of dollars during World War I from the US, and they would have to pay that debt. And the worst one was Germany. They damaged Germany so bad that between all these people, someone like Adolf Hitler had rised up, and a regime like the Nazi regime was formed. They put so much pressure on the German people for more than 10 years that they literally hated everybody. And that is exactly why Hitler's speech had a huge impact on the people. Hitler was a racist that had charisma, and he spoke in a way that the people trusted him. And that's why in January 1933, the Nazi regime had control over Germany. And the Nazis actually did fix the economy for Germany. And this is in a place where the world's economy is terrible. And that's why, on the other hand, whatever bad thing the Nazi regime did, the people would just close their eyes and sweep it under the rug. Because before these guys showed up, this is how the country looked like. They put so much pressure on the German government and the people after World War I that every racist or terrible thing these guys said, the people didn't care. The Nazis would blame the Jewish people, the Russian people, the British, the US, the Gypsy, and with these speeches, he made the German people actually hate them. After this, Germany's economy starts booming, but the entire world is still struggling. At the end of the 1930s, when World War II begins, the US economy is picking back up. But Europe was struggling for 10 years, and they have another war in their front lawn again. And this chaos is going to continue for 6 more years. The Europeans were the global superpower for hundreds of years, but these 2 world wars made that power go to the US and a little bit to the Soviets, and the Europeans were ranked down to the 2nd superpower. But what happened to the Middle East in this era? Iran, Afghanistan, Iraq, or the other country? As you know, in 1917 in Iran, there was a form of a Holocaust where millions of people starved to death. And that's because the British army would buy all the foods and give none to the Iranian people, so a lot of people starved to death. In Iran after World War I, in 1924, Ahmad Shah basically runs away from Iran, and Reza Shah is the new king. Reza Shah was only the king for 16 years, but he very quickly started to modernize Iran, something the Qajars would not do. And unfortunately, in 1941, the British and the Russians arrested Reza Shah and put his son in charge. In 1933 in Afghanistan, Mohammad Zahir Shah was the new king of Afghanistan. Zahir Shah, just like Reza Shah, began to modernize Afghanistan. But what was happening in Tajikistan? Tajikistan was a part of the Soviet Union, and they were behind the borders of the Iron Curtain. This is a time where the Ottoman Empire has collapsed and a bunch of fake countries are created west of Iran. Countries like Iraq, Kuwait, Saudi Arabia, Emirates, Oman, Palestine, Oman, Syria, Lebanon, all of them. When the world was burning, the Middle East was trying to modernize. Mohammad Zahir Shah in Afghanistan, Reza Shah in Iran, and Ataturk in Turkey.